pertains to designing for the web. Now, the field of UX design and user and usability testing is a pretty prominent one within the web and is a very viable career path. It's basically designed around making sure that you design interfaces and experiences for your users that are logical and make sense and are easily completed, thus making it so your website is more effective both in terms of converting, but also in terms of its overall goal. So when we talk about usability, we want to think about things in terms of specifically how they're designed. So if we look at these two images, we have this first one where we're basically looking at a stovetop, and the knobs down here are meant to map to the back left, back right, front right. And that doesn't really make a lot of sense. There's not an immediate mental connection between those things. Whereas this image over here, immediately you can tell that this knob is for the back left, this is back right, front left, because they're naturally mapped to each other. So that's the kind of thing that we want to think about when we're designing for usability. So what is usability testing? It's really designed to encompass a range of methods for identifying how users actually interact with a prototype or a complete product. So typically you would have users work with the product itself to perform tasks while there is an observer, and you can kind of listen, take notes, and see if your design is effective in the way that you had hoped that it would be. The goal for this is to create user-centric designs. It combines visual design of the product itself, it combines a potential user, and it combines an observer who watches the user try to interact with the design. So this is mostly about qualitative behavior, so less about return on investment, but more about um, was the user effective in was the user able to accomplish the goal that you set out with your design. When you do it, you're going to be testing with one user at a time. You're going to get user feedback as they attempt the tasks. The facilitator of the test really just kind of stays quiet and doesn't guide the user through the tasks. And really, the goal here is to find out what is working well and what's not working well, and that's going to give you insight in how to improve your design. And it's part of an overall iterative process in designing interfaces. So I will include a link to this deck in the YouTube video, but if you wanted to watch some usability tests, here's some links. And the usability industry is very strong, as I mentioned before. There's whole teams built around improving usability. At a former job of mine, we had a 10-person team that was exclusively dedicated to improving the usability of our interfaces. So when we're setting up a usability task, and we're test rather, um, we need to find out a few things. So we need to find out if users were able to complete the task that we set out for them. If so, how fast were they able to do it, and is that fast enough? What kind of paths did they take in trying? Did they have to like click around a bunch and find a bunch of different navigation paths before they actually got where they needed to be? Or are the paths that they followed efficient enough? What are the stumbling points where they have trouble with the interface? What problems do they have? And where do they get confused? Also, copy is a big part of usability, so what words work best in describing how to use an interface? So the benefits of this is that it gets you firsthand data from a real user. It kind of takes off the rose-colored glasses that you might have around your design because you've been heads down in it and married to it for so long, and really lets you see up front if in the real world the design works. You can usually do it quickly and cheaply. You can It could be just as easy as like finding somebody in the hallway and having them run through a prototype of your design. Um, or you could have a very elaborate setup where we used to pay firms great sums of money at a previous job of mine to get this kind of insight, but it can be pretty basic. When you do user testing, you save development time and money. You don't go through the entire process of building out your entire web application only to find out that it's not usable. It removes the guesswork and arguing that can happen within a team as you're trying to talk through different solutions. And then sometimes it gives you propaganda. It helps to convince larger members of the team of usability guidelines, and it increases the importance of the user's needs and the priority of usability over things like personal preference in a design process. So it's cost effective as the number of usability problems increases. Usually the number of test users increases, and you're able to kind of flatten that curve a little bit. Um, and then when we think about usability generally, there's some attributes that we want to focus on. First is learnability, like how fast can new users understand a given interface. The efficiency of use, can users use an interface without having to relearn it? Errors, what is the error rate and how severe are they? And then there's like subjective satisfaction, like how much do users like using the interface? A lot of times people will use the old design trope of like wanting to make, joyful experiences, but there is something to that. So if we're going to set up a user test, the first thing that you want to do is you want to plan them out. Like, what are you specifically going to test? You're going to conduct the user test and observe them. You'll get the findings back from the test to see what kind of information came out of it. You'll present the findings to relevant stakeholders. And then, if you need to, you'll make modifications to your design and then retest those modifications to see if they either solve the problem or improve the process. So there's a couple different times that you can test in the course of a design process. Really, you can do it anytime. You might want to test an old design to see if it needs to be improved. You might want to test a couple of different options for a given interface with competing designs. You might want to test very early in the process just to see if like a user flow works. You can do this with extremely low fidelity prototypes. You want to test partly implemented design to see if like a specific piece of UI is working. You want to test the final design once you're all done, and then you want to test post development to make sure and kind of validate your findings. And when you're doing this, you want to test iteratively. So you're going to test, modify, and then retest. So you're not just looking to do usability testing as the final validation. And the main reason for that is the earlier you test, the easier it is to make changes without a major investment. So when you're planning it, you're going to decide what to test. So you want to understand who the user is and what they want to accomplish. So you think of the kind of profile of your intended target audience, and then you determine the goal. Do you want to see if it's easy for somebody to open up a bank account, for example, or whatever your use case is? So once you have that information, you're going to put a test plan together. So you're going to decide on what tasks a user needs to complete that will make up part of that test. Then you're going to find some users. So usually you're going to recruit a target audience that makes up the demographic of what your application is trying to um, go for. You're going to do a relatively small number, so like 4 to 6, and then you want to determine the number of distinct user groups. Like you could think of those as personas, age groups, income brackets, etc. And then you want to incentivize people to actually do this and take it seriously. So that could be something as simple as buying them lunch or trading testing if you're doing it for each other. And then you're going to write out your tasks. So you're looking for first impression tasks, so like 5 adjectives, first impression about the app. Exploratory tasks where you give people like open-ended goals to complete, and then directed tasks which are answer-oriented, and usually the sessions are about 60 minutes or so. So when you're writing them, you want to make it scenario-based, so you're going to avoid having micro steps. So think about, let's say, an example of this would be, let's say you were interested in signing up for continuing education class on the STLCC website for summer of 2020. How would you do that? So you give someone that task and then you observe them navigating the STLCC site to see how easy that is. You're going to keep it neutral and unbiased, so you're going to leave out technical language. So you wouldn't say, I want you to find the select menu that's located under the drop down in the modal and then click the radio button to sign up. You want to make sure that it's something that is not based on somebody having technical knowledge about user interfaces. They need to be realistic, so it's something people would actually do. Generally, you don't want to have clues or hints, so like don't use the same wording as on the product. So you know if you had a restaurant website with an order online button, you probably wouldn't have a task that's like, I want you to order online. Uh, that's maybe not the best example, but it's along those lines. Then you want to create these tasks with your team, with your usability team, and then if you can, do a trial run to make sure that it goes smoothly with somebody who's kind of loosely involved with the project. So as the test is going on, There's important details about how to interact with the users. First, you want to encourage users to think aloud. So, to basically say exactly what they're doing as they go through the steps. So, you would expect them to say, like, okay, I'm looking for the register for classes button. So, I'm going to click here under the enroll now button and just kind of get their thought process as they're going through. You want to make sure that they feel relaxed and comfortable and know that they're not being judged. You're going to explain the testing. You generally explain that this is an in progress prototype and we just want to validate a few things. Need again make sure that they know that they're not being evaluated. They can stop at any point. You're interested in their feedback. You're going to keep the tone informal and pleasant. You don't want to ask leading questions, so you don't want to say like, "Did you think about looking over here under this drop down?" Um, and along those same lines, you want to avoid explaining or helping them out too early in the process. It's good to use the echoing technique. So as they're thinking out loud, you can kind of repeat their words back to them. Make sure that you actively listen to them as they're talking out loud so you can get some really good feedback. And then you want to minimize distractions. So typically uh, we would put people in their own room and kind of observe them through like a two-way mirror. Your test and you've got your findings back, you're going to look at them and kind of prioritize them. So we want to look at our the severity of our findings and look at high, medium, and low levels of severity. Like what is catastrophic, what is serious, and what is largely cosmetic. So once you have those findings classified, you're going to provide solutions. What do you absolutely have to fix? What would be easy to fix, like low-hanging fruit, and what's feasible? So once you have all of that together, you're going to present the findings to your stakeholders. You're going to present a bulleted list of top issues, a short description of the problems that exist, screenshots and annotated pictures of of the state of the app as the person was using it. We're going to include some quotes from users that did the testing and some highlight videos. So generally, you're going to be recording these sessions too, if done completely. And then you're going to have some potential solutions that you would provide to your stakeholders. So there's other types of user testing. You can do remote testing where it's basically the same thing, but you're not in the same room. You can have there are applications where you can like send somebody your URL and they can interact with the thing, and it basically it the app itself is able to take note of the stumbling points and provide that back to you. You can even do like paper prototyping where you like draw up your interface in different states as like a really early type of discovery. There's other methods for feedback. There's heat tracking for eye tracking to see what gets more engagement. Like this is a very interesting image. When the baby is looking directly at you, users were less likely to look at the text than when the baby was looking at the text. You can do focus groups. I don't find these to be quite as useful as user testing, but they are an option. There are email feedback. This is really just kind of like support surveys. And then this is really like a good visual of what it would be like. So your user would be in here interacting with your app, and there would be a facilitator in here. It would be being filmed, and then the team would be out in a different area, in a viewing area, watching the uh, watching the test as it takes place. There's some links in here that will be included with the PowerPoint. Um, and then lastly, there's this quote that Tim has here that usability is extremely important, but it's not everything. If usability engineers designed a nightclub, it would be clean, quiet, brightly lit, with lots of places to sit down, plenty of bartenders, menus written in 18-point sans serif, and easy to find bathrooms. But nobody would be there. They would all be down the street at Coyote Ugly, pouring beer on each other. So the point being, there's a balance that you need to strike between usability, drowning out everything else. But it is incredibly important, and it's a very viable career path in the field of web design.